problem in January and February of next year, and I wanted to make everybody aware of it early, because the building is going to be closed on our regular meeting days, the third Saturdays of January and February, because of conflict with Martin Luther King Day and President's Day. So in January and February, we'll be meeting on the fourth Saturday instead, at the same time at 1 o'clock. Let's see. Oh, Kay Staley, in conjunction with our billboard project, which Lou is going to update us on here in just a few minutes. Kay Staley, in conjunction with our billboard project, which Lou is going to update us on here in just a few minutes. Kay Staley has been in communication with the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and they are interested in placing a billboard here in Houston. And Kay is very aggravated that Kansas has 2 billboards and Houston has none. The thing is that Freedom from Religion is asking for the Freedom from Religion Foundation is asking for some donations. And if you are interested, you can go to their website and make a donation and designate it for the Houston billboard. Let's see. So Freedom from Religion Foundation. I think it's ffrf.org. Okay.
All the groups know about that.
We do. I need to put it on Google around here. If I can do that. Let's see. And Bob asked for a few minutes to talk about the capital fund, and then Lou, I asked to update us on the billboard, and then I guess Diane has to do this one. Yeah. Okay.
Which is intended to support the work that we're doing. It may cover eventually such ambitious things as buying a building, but I think that's quite a long way off still. But it may help us to advertise our presence around town and so on. Right now, it's invested in some mutual funds, and it's not been doing well. It's been doing reasonably well lately. It went down, but now it's coming back up again. And in fact, we've just reconquered $10,000. So it's pretty long, and we're going to circulate this box around. Should I circulate it around now? Or,
sure.
Yeah. And so if you would be so good as to put $1 or so, you know, we don't expect to get your
just
entire...
$1?
Or so. Whatever's convenient. Whatever's
And I'll pass it around.
You need an offering.
Well, you need one of those baskets on the
Well,
long
yeah,
stick.
that would be good.
No,
You've got to save up for that offering later. The other thing I would like to mention is that we're also starting a small group out in Sugarland, and this is our 3rd or 4th meeting of the Sugarland group, and so I thought I would pass this around. Anybody who's interested in coming along to that, please give me or my wife Sheena a call and let us know, and we'll save a place for you. Thanks a lot, Roxy.
I'd like to ask a question. I just came up here today with 2 guys from Clear Lake, and I'd like to know, is anybody else from the Clear Lake area?
Hi, so let me give you a summary of what's happening with this mythical billboard. Sheila Finch put me onto this, and I have volunteered to be the representative as far as getting a billboard or billboards put up in Houston. The billboard is up, and there's probably 30 or 40 of these up around the country already. So the template already exists. And it's the one that says, "Don't believe in God, you are not alone." And if you've traveled around the country, you may have seen it. In fact, Houston's going to be one of the last large metropolitan areas without a billboard. There's one in Dallas, one in Fort Worth, etc., etc., etc. There's a fellow named Fred Edwards, who's a consultant to the AHA, who goes around to various cities trying to get the various humanist and free thought groups talking to one another. Now, we've already succeeded for that here. We have the Free Thought Alliance. Most cities do not have organizations like the Free Thought Alliance. So, what's going to happen is, sometime this fall, this billboard will be up in Houston, probably twice. Okay? And there will be a URL, a link for people to go to. It will be the link to the Houston Free Thought Alliance. The only condition of this is that there also has to be a link to United Core, United Center of Reason. Okay? Because they're paying for it. So this costs us nothing. That's the best part. Wow. All right? Billboards like we are going to have put up, we don't know where yet, whatever, are $2,000 a month. Okay? So our price is $0. The AHA and United Core are sponsoring all of this. What's going to happen this fall is Fred Edwards, the consultant, is going to come to Houston as part of a book tour. Greg Parson, did I have the right name?
Epstein.
Excuse me?
Greg Epstein.
Oh, Greg.
Greg Epstein, sorry, has written a book. Fred Edwards is going to come to Houston as part of a publicity campaign for that. He's very good at getting people's names on the airways and getting interviews. So we'll get some publicity via National Public Radio and things like that, interviews, as well as the billboard put up. How's that sound to you? So as of right now, I'm kind of like the point person, so between me and the AHA United Core for the billboard, and it seems to be going very smoothly, yes?
Interviews with who?
Well, one will be with the fellow who's writing the book.
Okay.
All right.
Other humanists in the area?
Excuse me?
Other interviews with humanists in the area?
Yeah, and he doesn't have, Fred doesn't have an agenda yet. This won't be until probably November. But he's been, I was talking to the president of the Dallas Humanist Group, and he said they got more publicity from the radio interviews than they did from the billboards. We're going to go for both. So we, at some point, will have to decide where the billboards are going to go and what.
Absolutely.
You know, the city has some rules about billboards that they didn't have before. We're going to try to get under the radar on that. So, for a group that isn't really, really proactive, this is like, this is like going to Mars. But we're all looking forward to it. It should be fun. Yeah. So, that's what's happening. If you have any more questions, if you'd like to help, comments, I am, as I said, the point person. Sheila Finch is my second. And we've had other people. Steve Jordan's wife knows a lot about communications and has offered to help us get whatever we need publicized. So I'm getting a lot of encouragement from the other groups as well. Church of Free Thought, etc. Let us know how we can help. So there's a lot behind this. Yes?
I was just thinking, if you put the billboard in front of one of those big mega churches across the street.
Well, here's the only problem with it. I don't know, in this morning's Chronicle, I forgot to bring the paper with me. There was a humanist group that put ads on a bus. Yeah. Okay? Yeah, out in California somewhere. And a lot of people complained about it, so the transportation company took the signs down. Now they're getting challenged by civil liberties groups. They don't have the right to do that. So I expect if we should be so daring as to put the billboard up in front of one of the mega churches that use it, it won't be there very long. Right? So
in this town, the bus company is a publicly owned franchise, I think. So I don't think if we were to do something like that, we might have less problems with it. If somebody objected, we could always use the public.
Right, we're taxpayers and
No,
yeah.
that's specifically what happened there. I posted an article about it on the roundtable. I forgot what it said, but yeah, it was publicly owned. You know, they're all public bus companies now.
Okay, that's, obviously, we're gonna see what happens with the billboard and everything else, and see what kind of press we get on that. Roxy says she's prepared to be interviewed on Fox News in the morning when they see the billboard and they say, you know.
Yeah, and this is really the tamer of the ads. The one the Freedom from Religion Foundation has is a little bit more biting.
Yeah, there was
This is
another.
with the cloths, it shows the cloths.
Yes.
Oh, there's another billboard up somewhere that says, you can be good without God.
I like that.
That one I
Yeah.
think is more laid back and may not get everybody's back out.
Yeah, well, like I said, the Don't Believe in God is actually owned by CBS. Actually owns the temple. But we're not paying for it, so we don't care.
Well, the point is, if you did it, you want to keep it there. So I think you can be good without God is not so much a threat to the nuts. In other words, they themselves realize that they occasionally have to be good without a supreme being. So I think that one seems to be less threatening, but I leave it up to you guys.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna take the cheapest route of this one. Okay. If you've got any questions, you can reach all of us through the website email. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'm next. All right, a few things then. First of all, Stephen, I'm going to remind Lou that for the month of September, Lou, you're in charge of refreshments.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Marion for October.
I've been reminded.
Okay, and I'm going to, I need a volunteer for November. November. I'm going to pass the list around. Now, see, December is the winter solstice party, and then all of us, along with the other members of the, exactly, we bring in food and so forth. And as I look out today, I know that in Europe, August is the month of vacation when everybody disappears, but I feel like that it must be true here too, because we're a smaller group today, for those of you that are new. But anyway, I'm going to pass this around in the hopes that November will be magically filled. Well, not magically, since I don't believe in magic, but anyway. Okay. And next thing then, are we going to have the planning committee meeting? A planning meeting, which is open to anyone who's interested then in taking part in this. It's going to meet then after this meeting at La Madeleine in, what is that, Meyerland Plaza, whatever that it's called, Meyerland Shopping Area. Okay.
What does the planning meeting consist of?
It consists of talking about planning what we're going to do about programs in the future and so forth, and who's going to be responsible. And I am going to be adamant that if you say, oh, let's get so-and-so speaker, I'm going to say, good, you call them, you take care of it, you make sure they're there, you do that, and so forth, because as some of you know, I've started training to be a volunteer at the Natural Science Museum, and I hope to be wrangling butterflies and iguanas and dinosaurs and that kind of thing. And also still helping out here and doing things here too. So anyway,
It's just a chance for you to put in.
yeah. So just if you want to have input then into what we do and to help us then in that, because all of us have busy lives and whatever. So even when we're retired, unlike my oldest niece thought at one time, what are you going to do when you retire?
Well, there's plenty to do in Houston.
Exactly. You know, I'm just sharing this idea. Okay. Before we get to the main speaker, then I want to have the humanist moment. I sort of say the humanist movement, but we are in that movement, the humanist moment, which is the time then when we speak about some famous, or it doesn't have to be a famous humanist, or some event in the humanism and the history of humanism and so forth, or sometimes read then an essay that deals with humanism. Today I'm going to talk about a person. When I was trying to find then and think of a person to do that would be a good example of a humanist on the internet, I found this list of humanists, and there was a name that just popped out at me, and I thought it was kind of surprising. This person was born as Thelma McQueen, but you would perhaps have heard of her as Butterfly McQueen. Does that name ring a bell to anybody, Butterfly McQueen? And what is she known for, if you remember?
Slave Girl and Gone with the Wind.
Right, she played Prissy in Gone with the Wind. And so I'm so glad to know, and of course your intelligence would tell you that that was not what the real person was like, but it's fascinating to me to read more about Butterfly McQueen. She was honored in 1989 by the Freedom from Religion Foundation. They honored then Butterfly McQueen with their first Free Thought Heroine Award at its national convention in Atlanta, which was coincidentally in 1989 held during the 50th anniversary of the release of Gone with the Wind. Ms. McQueen, a life member of the Freedom from Religion Foundation and a member since 1981, was best known for depicting Chrissy in the movie Gone with the Wind. This is right off the Freedom of Thought website. I did not write this, people. This was so easy this time. I was like, wow. Ms. McQueen was nearly a lifelong atheist. After brief remarks that day when she was given the award and a poetry recitation before the audience at the convention, she then sang Paper Moon, accompanied by Dan Barker on the piano. Dan Barker, what is he? I forgot to look at the piano. What's he known for? He's written all those books about truth, about
Preacher man.
Yeah, exactly.
He was a charismatic evangelical preacher.
And now he's become right, exactly.
Also got a CD with
He was
name
did the music arrangements for Catherine Kuhlman, I think.
Oh, okay. So that's why he was playing the piano while she was while she sang. Then Ms. McQueen told in a reporter from the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, she said, quote, "As my ancestors are free from slavery, I am free from the slavery of religion." Although she was raised a Christian, she began to question the value of organized religion as a child. She related one eye-opening experience with clergy as a youngster when she was riding a train to New York and offered to share her lunch with two young preachers. Instead of taking one sandwich and one piece of cake, they took the whole thing. She said, quote, "If we had put the energy on earth and on people that we put on mythology and on Jesus Christ, we wouldn't have any hunger or homelessness." Christianity and studying the Bible has, quote, "sapped our minds so we don't know anything else." She said that she tithed not to religion, but to my friends, spending her time, her energy cleaning up the slums. And in relation to that, she said, "They say the streets are going to be beautiful in heaven. I'm trying to make the streets beautiful here. At least in Georgia and in New York, I live on beautiful streets. When it's clean and beautiful, I think America is heaven, and some people are hell." Born in Tampa, she gained her unusual name after dancing in a butterfly ballet as a child in a production of A Midsummer Night's Dream. Interested in purchasing some new furniture, she auditioned for the part of the simple-minded slave Chrissy at age 26 and was initially rejected as too old, too plump, and too dignified. And I want to point out that to those of you that may not quite remember which one she was the one that told Miss Scarlett, "Miss Scarlett, I don't know nothing about birthing no babies." That was her part.
After telling everybody that she was.
That she did, yes. And in the longer version of all this, she said then that the slave that she understood that why the character did that because that was self-preservation. That she told Miss Scarlett that she knew about the birth of babies, how to help, childbirth, so that she wouldn't be sent out to the fields and all that kind of thing, so that she could be with her. So she said she understood the motivation for the character, Corlins. She says, "I was the only unhappy one," she reflected years later about the movie that was shot when she was 28. "It was not a pleasant part to play. I didn't want to be that little slave, but I did my best, my very best." Her best was very good indeed. Ms. McQueen stole every scene she was in, whether opposite Vivian Leigh or Clark Gable. She was offered a succession of maid roles in such movies as Duel in the Sun, Mildred Pierce, or Cabin in the Sky, and she once played a wax sergeant in Since You Went Away. She quit movie acting in 1947 to avoid further typecasting, although she returned as a maid on the TV show Beulah in 1950 to 1953. No, I don't remember that one. It's kind of early in my life. She appeared occasionally on Broadway and supported herself in a succession of jobs as a real-life maid a companion to an elderly white woman, also as a taxi dispatcher, a sales lady at Macy's, and a seamstress at Saks. She told The Guardian during a visit to Great Britain in 1989, "Any honest job I have taken." She said, "Now I am happy I did Gone with the Wind," she once told the Washington Post. "I wasn't when I was 28, but it's part of Black history. You have no idea how hard it is for Black actors. But things change. Things blossom with time." She returned to films in 1974 playing Clarice in Amazing Grace and Maul Kennewick in Mosquito Coast in 1986 with Harrison Ford. That same year, she appeared in a PBS version of Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. She was a continual student, taking classes at 5 universities and even reading Gone with the Wind in Spanish. And I haven't done that. Now I feel challenged. In 1975, at the age of 64, Ms. McQueen received a bachelor's degree in political science from New York City College. An off-stage role she enjoyed was that of Santa Claus at children's hospitals. She reported that the children were delighted with a Black female Santa with a high voice. I'm trying to picture that. I wish I could know that. In later years, she adopted a public elementary school in her beloved neighborhood of Harlem, where she patrolled the playground, picked up litter, and looked after the children. She lived in New York in the summer and Georgia in the winter. Neighbors interviewed after her death said she was known just as Thelma by many who did not realize her identity, and Mama Back to friends. She liked to ride a bicycle with training wheels around the neighborhood, was a health food advocate, and usually lunched at the Belle Terrace Senior Center, where she played and sang from an impressive repertoire of classical music, jazz, and show tunes. She died tragically of injuries suffered in a kerosene heater accident in her Augusta, Georgia home on December 22, 1995. Revelations that Ms. McQueen had remembered the Freedom from Religion Foundation and her will brought surprise nationwide coverage of her death. In an interview with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Foundation President Ann Gaylor recalled how Ms. McQueen stayed in touch over the years through exchange notes, calling her gentle and kind, and someone willing to speak freely about her atheistic beliefs. And now, you're going to change then from Butterfly McQueen to today's speaker. Okay. She has not said she was going to sing anything, so. She just said she was lucky. Oh, they were lucky. I'm sorry. I put that around, didn't I? Her topic is active nonviolence as a conflict resolution. She describes herself as a student of the social sciences, a teacher by profession, and also a certified financial planner. Her interest in nonviolence stems from reading Thomas Merton and following Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights movements of the 1960s. Please join me in welcoming Susan Geisecke. Practiced.
Notes.
Oh, did I pick them up? Somebody else was picking them up?
The gentleman before you.
Oh, Lou?
Did you have a folder?
Yeah.
When I saw you walk away, I thought, oh, I suspect that folder looks awfully familiar.
Yes.
Oh,
Pretty sneaky.
It's a job for me. I might do that.
while Lou was getting that together, I'm sure you picked up the inference about being, thank you, a certified financial planner. And if you've experienced the devastation in your portfolio that I have, you can understand why I'm here to talk about nonviolence. I'm no longer a financial planner, but still have an interest in that area, of course. Thank you very much for that kind and warm introduction. Thank you especially to Marion Hiller, who is the person who invited me to come address you because of an association that we share. I feel humbled and honored to address the Humanist Society because of this invitation and Diane's warm emails. I went to the website to study what humanism means. I find it a very exciting movement. Roxy welcomed me as an addition to your email distribution list yesterday, and I look forward to following with this group and hopefully participating. I enjoyed seeing the presentations that you've had the last 3 to 4 months listed on your website. What a wonderful venue to honestly share with each other, using reason as a background for how we can relate as people to people and work for the betterment of humankind. Diane recommended a name and asked if anybody knew that person. I have some names to share with you too. Has anyone heard of Emily Balch? Has anyone heard of Jeanette Rankin? Has anyone heard of Barbara Lee? Before I leave, make me share about those women. Since I originally thought I could join the group, I had to reschedule, and I had the opportunity to go to New York City to join with some cousins of mine. We get together once a year for a fun weekend together. The highlight of our weekend this time was to get to see the Broadway production of God of Carnage. 4 actors, all wonderful. Of course, the one we went to see was John Gallifino, the soprano.
Oh, yeah. The 2 couples.
Yes, the 2 couples. He was perhaps the weakest of the 4 actors. The others were all so good. The play, only 4 people, 2 couples. They start out visiting because one son hit another son in the mouth and damaged his teeth. They were very reasonable, educated, modern people. By the end of the evening, the tulips were flying across the stage. It was unbelievable. Hence the title, God of Carnage. What it pointed out to me was this ability to relate to each other on a human level is not an easy thing to do. Educated, reasonable people, and this just in an hour and a half degenerated to carnage. I thank Marion because he said to me as a newly retired person about a year ago, "What are you studying? When are you going to make a presentation?" So he's opened a whole new area for me and now a whole new organization. Not only am I interested in the social sciences, but having been a financial planner for 20 years, very, very interested in words and the power of words. Socrates fought this battle some 2,500 years ago. He may have lost the battle, but he won the war because we still remember him for fighting rhetoric and for standing up to the point of death for the fact that words are important. So the question that we're examining today is, can humankind avoid violent conflict by teaching/learning to respect the human dignity of each living person? I've studied 2 movements. Nonviolent communication. Later I'll give you a sheet of paper and this will be printed on if you're interested in following up. And the steps of nonviolence. Nonviolent communication deals with developing powers of observation, expressing personal feelings, expressing needs, personal needs and asking for a request based on those personal feelings and needs. The passive resistance, or as Gandhi liked to call it, soul force movement of Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. We've watched for the past 20 years 7 major not terrorists, but dynasties, world governments have been overthrown by passive resistance. This movement has made so much progress that it's now beginning to identify steps in the process and looking for the science of nonviolence and passive movement. We'll talk about that too. So the question then is, how do these two movements intersect? The way we're going to spend our remaining time together is I'm going to share with you about 5 small vignettes of personal observations or experiences. In the process of that time, I suspect, given what I know about the people I've met in this organization so far, it may stimulate in your mind some comment or thought or experience that you may want to share, which time I'd like to take a break and ask for that sharing so I get to know you a little bit better. Then we'll continue by talking about the practical ways that active nonviolence and nonviolent communication, what are the steps involved? Sound like a plan? Historically, I look at the Bible and I see Jesus say words like, turn the other cheek, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. I often think, what does this mean? It's not easy. If it was easy, we'd all be better at it. We look at the past century where science and technology made unbelievable advances. Death and destruction was unbelievable. So the question that is raised is there another way? Secondly, Robert McNamara, who just recently passed away, was recorded in a movie called Fog of War. 3/4 of the way through that movie, he mentions a dinner he attended in the 90s with the leader of the North Vietnamese forces. He reports that he leaned over, looked this man in the eye, reviewed the American domino theory and our fear of Vietnamese-Chinese connection, only to be told, we have fought the Chinese influence in Vietnam for 1,000 years. Whatever made the Americans think that we would cooperate with the Chinese now? That revelation hit me between the eyes. 2.3 million people lost their lives over that misunderstanding. Arvind Gandhi, the granddaughter of Mahatma Gandhi, who remember experienced his revelation in South Africa, so furiously angry at that experience that he has literally changed the world because of that directed anger. This young woman was 13 years old when she was sent to spend the summer with her grandfather. Every evening, she said, we would analyze the day's events. We would identify physical and or emotional / passive violence. In the course of that summer with her grandfather, she learned that the passive violence was far more insidious than the open violence. Passive violence fuels the fire of physical violence. How can we extinguish a fire if we don't first cut off the fuel that ignites that fire? Her grandfather said to her, "We must become the change we wish to see in the world." Hence there are books like this written called The Peace Book. She records hundreds of ways that we become individual peacemakers. Then I wanted to share with you a comment my husband made after 9/11. What we ought to do, he said, I thought this was a story, is drop blue jeans and radios all over Afghanistan and Pakistan and encourage people to tell them what progress really is. I can't tell you how many times I have looked back on that comment and think, the man had a point, and it would have cost a whole lot less than what's happened today, given along the $10 billion a month that we're putting into these useless wars. At any rate, I thought, we cannot build peace on a foundation of fear. Then I wanted lastly to share with you a woman I met in Cameroon in 2005. I was fortunate enough to travel with a group of women from the United States, and we were met in Cameroon with an equal number of women from West Africa. We traveled together for 2 weeks. Not making presentations, but actually listening. My favorite hour was the hour that Martha and I spent together waiting for some sort of a bus. Martha was from Liberia, and she all of a sudden said to me, "Let me tell you about an angel that appeared to me in church." And I thought, ooh, okay. The angel told her, now think about Liberia in the turn of the century. Liberia was caught in the middle of the Civil War, 3 different groups of guerrillas. Charles Taylor was doing all Charles Taylor kind of things. She said to me one Saturday, I was sitting in church, and an angel appeared to me. And I thought, okay, Martha, we'll just see where this story goes. The angel told me, we want peace. No more war. I thought, well, that sounds like something I've heard lots of people wish for the world. But Martha was different. Martha did something about it. She started talking to her friends, the other women in the Lutheran church that she attended. And then they started talking to other friends in other churches. Then they talked to their Muslim friends. Then they decided that they were going to talk to the leaders of the church. And then they said to their husbands, we're going to go out and talk to the guerrillas. The husband said, you're going to get killed. Just that simple. So the mantra the women came up with was, no more food, no more church, no more bed. I'm not sure what appealed to the men the most, but the women did go out and talk to the guerrillas. And as you know, things changed in Liberia. And there is a movie out now called Pray the Devil Back to Hell. And it's about the movement of the women and Elizabeth, I can't remember her last name, the woman who's president there now. And she has begun openly to acknowledge the force of these women. 3,500 women sat in front of the presidential palace waiting for Charles Taylor to come home. It sounds like an interesting movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. But Martha was a powerful influence on me. I'm sure by this time you've thought of some experiences or some questions or comments that you may wish to share. And I'm interested in knowing who's here and what you might have to say. So we'll start back there.
Well, I have a question for you.
Okay, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Bridget Tessa.
Okay, hi.
As I think clearly everybody, I'm from Clear Lake.
Right.
And it's a long drive. The question that I have for you is, How do you define passive violence?
Passive nonviolence.
I heard you say passive
I'm
violence.
sorry, if I said it, I apologize.
Oh, okay.
Passive nonviolence.
Okay.
And if you think about Gandhi and the struggle for Indian independence from Britain, those were examples. And we'll talk more specifically about how that process works.
Okay, but what you said, or at least what I thought I heard, was passive violence leading to actual violence.
Oh, passive, I did use the word passive. Let's see how that was actually stated. And this was in connection with Gandhi's granddaughter. Passive violence fuels the fire of physical violence.
Right, and that's what I was asking you.
Sure. Passive violence would be where a person's spirit or self-respect is eroded. If someone is told that they're worthless, that their views are not valued, that they can't do anything right. Oh, you're clumsy. You know, those are passive violence statements that destroy a person's self-respect. And that fuels, what she is saying is that fuels physical violence, because pretty soon that person says, I have had enough.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you for pointing that out. All right. And you are?
Me? My name is Doug King.
Hi, Doug.
May I disagree with you on something?
Oh, of course. That's what this is all about, I think.
All right. You probably heard this before, more that, and it's probably overstated, more that nonviolence is great in theory, but in practice. But I see it in the context, say, a standard American school, where kids can be awfully mean to other kids. Now, one kind of common bit of advice is that you could send, or your kid having trouble, whatever, could take martial arts class, because it builds self-esteem. It teaches them, you only use martial art for self-defense. You don't go looking for trouble. Okay, that's pretty conventional. Then where I kind of differ, the problem is that a lot of martial arts are pretty serious. In fact, there was a case where, I want to say the kid was Japanese and this other older kid was baiting him. And like his dad, the Japanese kid was a black belt in karate. And his dad, had already told him, if you need to fight, just fight with your left hand only. So this other kid threw the first punch, but then he gave, really either the guy's jaw, or he really hurt the other kid, maybe as a ninth grade, more than he could have. All right. So, and initially, the police kind of clumsily pressed charges against the Japanese kid, and then, it actually, all kinds of stuff was happening in the school. I think it might have been like, it kind of became a public event and stuff. All right, well, what I'm thinking, and I wrote it down as you were talking, and I haven't heard this, but to me it's an awfully good idea. Tight defensive boxing and box to a draw, which no one teaches kids. That, in fact, all of our movies are kind of the opposite. Like if you watch Kung Fu with the guy that, okay, he bides time, he lays back, and then he wipes him out. When he finally fights, he wins decisively. Well, you might not want to do that. You might want to fight earlier, but box to a draw. And so that's generally what I would say. It's not standard, it's not goody two-shoes, it's not nonviolence, but, and maybe even foreign policy that, because many of our fellow citizens, they kind of respect any kind of strength. Even though George Bush was incompetent in a number of areas, the fact that he's, quote, a strong leader, people respected that. And I'll leave it at that.
Good comment. One very interesting book you might enjoy reading is called 19 Minutes by Jodi Peralta. I recommend that you take it. It's fast read. She writes it and just kind of pulls you
My name is Eric Ray. Yeah, I had a comment about passive violence in general, and I recently read a book that was recommended on the Point of Inquiry podcast, so I'm sure a lot of people here are probably familiar with that. It was called Evil Genes, and the book is about the genetic basis for why a certain percentage of the population is just what's called a borderline personality disorder, where they basically have no concept of, no empathy towards other people. And unfortunately, a lot of these people end up in positions of power. Like the examples used in the book were Slobodan Milosevic, Saddam Hussein, Hitler, Stalin, Chairman Mao, and so on. And I think maybe this is where a lot of the problems with the passive resistance movements run into problems. Where, for example, in India with Gandhi, that was effective because it was directed against the British population, who right, and had this appeal to the sympathy of the whole community, and that was very effective. But against someone like Slobodan Milosevic or these other people who cannot be bargained with, who have no bottom to their well of evil, then it's hard to see that as being an effective strategy. So maybe that will come up in some of your examples.
Good comment.
Yes, I agree with Eric, because with the nonviolent resistance in India against the British, they were dealing with people that were basically a democracy, civilized people. They weren't by and large psychopaths. And I know that word is supposed to be old-fashioned, but I continue using it because I think it's very accurate.
It's alive and well.
If you had tried nonviolent resistance with Adolf Hitler, the tanks would have just rolled over you, and Hitler would not have cared how many people he killed.
That's true. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Ron Titus.
Hi, Ron.
I got short-term memory of shock. I can't quite remember what you said, but you did trigger something in my mind.
Yes.
And this goes back at one time I was preaching.
Yeah.
And I remember against the Vietnam War, and suggested instead of the Americans hitting the shores, shooting up everything in sight, is to hit the shores, throwing out bubble bombs.
You'd like my husband.
Okay, and I say, the reason as crazy as that is, my argument against myself is to say that's crazy, is think of the opposite. Shoot at everybody, that's what I'm saying.
Yes. And we know what the result of that is. So the question again is there another way? Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. And would you like to introduce yourself?
Pressure.
Okay. Either of you? Okay. Lou?
I have something to add to your presentation. It's in the Chronicle the other day. Great Britain's oldest surviving combatant of World War I just died. He's about 111. And a few years ago, somebody interviewed him, and they said about 20 million people died in World War I. He said, was it worth it? And his reply was, not one. Heavy stuff, huh?
Yes, it is. I read that too. All right, let's move on to this. Oh, okay.
Unless there's somebody else.
Okay.
I often think naivete. I was horrified, even among the humanists, when this con man who wanted to take over from Saddam Hussein, who was far from an angel, Chalabi or Halabi, I don't know, he conned everybody in our State Department into going to Iraq. Afghanistan was something else. We were attacked. And I told everybody, I said, I know from people, Assad killed 20,000 people. What's this about gassing 30,000 Kurds? I said, we don't even look at Syria. And everybody said it's the oil. I said, it's North American naivete. We went into a country, we have made all the other adjoining countries hostile to us. And if I were even an Iranian, I should think the same way. And we went to this country where this dictator was far from a saint. but the people were going about their business. And while they're naive people that will pick up on evil because they don't think it's evil, it's doing good. And once this Chalabi, well, they say Rumsfeld and Cheney wanted to go in anyway, but this Chalabi who wanted to take over turned tail and ran. And then it was North American naivete that pushed us into Vietnam. I was living in Mexico. Everybody said, what business is it of the States? I said, none. I agree with you perfectly. Latin America may be poor and starving, but you couldn't I mean, the Latin American is astute, and when I say astute, a shoeshine boy could not have been starving, could not have been conned into any of these wars. They were amused that we got conned into these wars. We are being conned constantly. Is there any way to fight this North American naivete, which is always being conned into wars that devastate and ruin people's lives? I don't know what the answer is, but I have tremendous guilt feelings for what we've been doing. And I told everybody—
raising the question.
Yes, please.
That's the start. You need to raise the question.
Get rid of the Republicans, that's the answer.
Okay, Mary, why don't we start with you and we'll go down this row and then wrap up with the front row.
Well, you are extremely well read about this issue, and I enjoy your talk. I would like to add only one point, that we don't have genes for evil or for good. I think, basically speaking, we have developed through the biological process and social leaning certain genes, if we may use the term genes for analogy with biological systems, which induce us to cooperation with other people in society. But from time to time, we develop, through some kind of reasoning, and we think that we are rational creatures, some justifications for deviations from these natural tendencies which we have. And I wonder, what is the role of education in the whole process? In a very broad sense, not only schooling, but also literature, art, modern times, TV, and other ways of communication with people and affecting other people, modifying their behavior, and so on. And I tend to agree with those people who say that, for example, seeing violence on TV induces young people for this type of behavior. Because we, again, have in our biological systems certain tendency for imitation, and we observe this in higher animals, for example, that they very often do certain things by imitation, observing others and repeating the same patterns. And I think humans are not different in many other, in this aspects and many other aspects. So I wonder whether we shouldn't focus on educating people in very general, broad sense. I mean, also literature and all kinds of ways we interact with other people.
Excellent. Hold that thought. All right. I want everyone to get a chance to introduce and have a question they want. And then we have a handout that we want to review, and then we'll be more for open questions. Y'all, you want to go back and take your turn here?
I'm going to speak for violence. If somebody comes in my house and is going to rob or rape or whatever, I'm going to meet them with a gun, and I'm going to shoot, and I'm going to shoot to kill.
Exactly.
There is a place for violence. If I see somebody raping or shooting at somebody else in a robbery, I might go down, but I sure hope I go down fighting.
Exactly. Pope John the 23rd. I did a lot of study for a graduate paper one time on the just war theory, and I thought his quote was wonderful. He said, "We cannot stand by and watch our fellow man abused." So it's a learning process. Your point's well taken. My husband discovered a holster, a gun holster in our backyard today. And I have to tell you, my emotions are running pretty high. Wasn't there yesterday. I was there this morning. And it's brand new. So, you know, I'm...
Good Lord.
Wow, interesting. And would you introduce yourself?
No.
Okay. All right. Anyone else on that row? Okay, Diana?
Well, I feel like then, I thought that you weren't saying that we shouldn't defend ourselves, that we shouldn't fight when there was no other choice. There was no other choice in World War II. I think that's the difference there. There was a choice with Vietnam, there was a choice in other instances. And if you bring this down to people's daily lives, that I think that there are times when we get angry, when we have a reaction to other people over everyday things, and that's where perhaps because we are reasonable people, at least to a point, we don't resort to violence, but we could tone down our anger, we could think on the other side, we could try to put ourselves in the other person's shoes. As a teacher of many things in high school, one of the things I taught was sophomore English and the book To Kill a Mockingbird, and that was my favorite point with students, and it sometimes worked, Marion, to get them to see then, put yourself in the other person's shoes, okay? There was a teacher in the other hallway, another English teacher, that if the students went in, I also taught them, of course, everything, so if they entered her classroom and they happened to drop their books loudly on their desk, you know, kids don't realize, she would just chew them out. The kids would come to me and I said, okay, I don't know, you know, a lot, but put yourself in her shoes. Yes, she shouldn't have done that, but put yourself in her shoes. Sometimes you have to be compassionate and say, maybe things are going on in her life that you don't know about, and even if I do, I can't tell you. And therefore, I got students sometimes to see that something from the other person's point of view and not just from their own. And also, you were talking about then that if you tell a person, oh, you're horrible and so forth and you're no good, I heard too many teachers when they were chewing out some student for doing something say that. My approach, and most of the time it worked, most of the time, and I don't know how I learned this, maybe somebody, whatever, but you know, because I could be angry at some student in the classroom who just interrupted me or whatever, and I would send them out in the hall first so that I could cool off for a minute. Don't leave them out in the hall, that's the wrong thing too, you need to go out there too. But then I would calm down, I would go outside, of course first get the class with something that they could work on, right? Don't leave them unattended basically. Go outside then, and I would think of something positive to say to the student. Even if I had to lie, to fabricate it, I would say, you know, I think all these good things about you. Sometimes the best thing I could think was, you have a wonderful sense of humor, because you just made this horrible joke in class. But you could think of something. Usually then I would say sometimes to them, maybe you're having a bad day, I don't know what's going on in your life, but you know, I can understand that, but in this classroom, this is what you need to do. I would say all these good things about them, and I'd say, but you cannot do so-and-so in my classroom. That's where I would draw the line. It works. Now, I will tell you, you say that maybe we don't have, that it's not genetic, I don't know. There is one student that I will never forget, that it didn't work. It didn't work, and I mean, I would try. When I would talk to him and try to reason with this young man, it was like the old saying, the lights are on but nobody is home. And I wrote then, you know, and I learned to be careful after this, I wrote on his discipline card that he was incorrigible because I had talked to his mother, his father wasn't there, I don't know where his father was, I talked to his mother, I talked to the vice principals, I'd gone through all the possible things, you know, I tried to work with him, all these things. And so that's what I had written on his discipline card because I was saying, you know, I need more help from you, vice principal, and so forth. What happened? 2 years later, the district attorney's office called him, wanted me to testify in court against this young man in the punishment phase of his murder trial. So, fortunately, he plea bargained. I didn't have to testify, but you know, I don't know. I tried everything with that young man. And I will never forget because somewhere I think, you know, why? Why?
I thought your comment was really interesting when you said, I needed some other ways. I needed some help. Right. Now there you're talking about your needs and your feelings and your request for help. Yeah. Very powerful experience, I'm sure. Thank you for sharing that.
Awesome. I'll be honest, the first thing I thought about when I was thinking of this topic is the stuff that's going on in these town hall meetings now with the about health care, and people are just going crazy. It's, I don't understand how they can't even take a breath and let somebody talk. And I think sometimes that, I don't know if it's dumbness or lack of time or whatever, but people just don't analyze these things and say, well, you know, this would be an advantage to me as well, not only to everybody else, but they don't seem to see that. And not only do they not want it for themselves, but they don't want it for anybody else. And the way they're going to keep everybody from having whatever it is to stand up and yell, or heaven help us, bring guns to these public meetings.
Because they can.
And, right. And you know, I guess I wouldn't be, I mean, the Second Amendment says apparently we have a right to carry guns, and I can't say, you know, that I don't agree with the Constitution. But when you bring firearms into an emotional situation like that, I think too people get caught up in the emotion of it and realize they're having a big effect, and then it's kind of like when your child realizes I found the button to push, they keep pushing it. And these people keep pushing the button.
Sure. I recall when Medicare was introduced, and the hoopla from the AMA of all places, and now the AMA is a big supporter for healthcare reform. I took the liberty of actually going to my senator's office Thursday. My appointment was at 1 o'clock. I thought, you know, I've got anger on this issue. I'm going to use it constructively, so I called and made an appointment. Spoke to Jake, the legislative aide for Senator Cornyn. We had 15 very good minutes together where I shared my concerns. He listened, felt like I had been heard. He never said one way or the other, of course, that's his job, but he said he would make sure Senator Cornyn heard my views. And I did say to him, I expected to see screaming people outside the front door when I came in. His comment was, there are very vocal minorities, and unfortunately they get most of the press, which gave me some sort of comfort that Senator Cornyn may be beyond just being scared by minorities. At any rate, I felt like it was time for him to hear from a bigger range, a broader range of people, so to speak. Oh, and you too, sir.
Yes, my name's David Newman. The issue about violence, I have to think to myself, from the very beginning, our universe was forged from one of the most violent event that we know, namely it's called the Big Bang. But when you look out into the non-material and non-human aspects of reality, there's so much violence occurring. Even in nature, we see massive hurricanes. I just saw something the other day. There was a typhoon that hit Taiwan and dumped like 102 inches of rain. That's 98 inches, 96 inches is 8 feet. So this thing dumped 8.5 feet of rain on that island. So that's a pretty violent affair. That's non-human, but when you consider the aspects of humanity from our very inception, organisms have waged violence against each other throughout the history of existence on this planet, and here we are. We come from that. We have the marks of that heritage built into the fabric of our being. And how do we escape such a ignominious heritage, so to speak? In the case of what Roxy and what's her name next to you were talking about, with incorrigible children, or I was just read an article a few years ago in Scientific American talking about the effects of long-term child abuse on the brain physiology of children as they grow into adults. And these researchers did brain scans, PET scans on particular people in prisons that had a history of violence, and they found qualitative physiological differences between people who were subjected to long-term psychological and physical abuse from the normal people. And they said the jury's still out as to the ultimate implications of such abuse, but the indications were clear that there was definitely differences in their brain physiology. And we see right now with the people coming back from Iraq and from all the wars and stuff, the effects of long-term
post-traumatic stress disorder on their behavior, and it's been chronicled time after time after time, and this stuff really has a devastating impact on people. And a good author that I wanted to mention, and his name is Michael Parenti. He does some excellent research into the aspects of what I call class warfare, and how the plutocrats, the ruling classes, use violence and demagoguery. Like you said, words have meanings. These people use words, they try to change and manipulate the meanings of words to control. There was a guy named Alex Carey, he called manipulating public opinion. And then, of course, Noam Chomsky, he's got his book, The Manufacturing Consent. And this is some of the aspects that people use in order to maintain the power they have, and also accumulate and concentrate more power and control in their hands. And if it's just a numbers game that they're after, they're really not interested in our welfare. It's just like the mentioned that Roxy about the healthcare situation. The insurance companies, that's not healthcare, it's health insurance. They don't care about, they deny people. There's constantly people that are being thrown out into the streets that are being denied healthcare. Michael Moore, he had his documentary Sickle, where he talked about how, just outrageous incidents where people were denied health, the medical procedures, just because the insurance companies didn't want to pay for them. And this is what it's about. This is what I heard about the other day, some CEO of some insurance company has a $1.6 billion stock option. What are these people going to do with all this money? It doesn't matter. Like Parenti says in one of his books, these people have some pathological bent for accumulating resources unto themselves far beyond anything they even need. And how do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Yeah, you raised some really good points. How do you spell Parenti?
P-A-R-E-N-T-I.
E-N-T-I.
He's got a book that's called Democracy for the Few. But he's wrote about 20 or 25 books already. He did a critique on the assassination of Julius Caesar. And what he showed in his investigation was that the reason why Julius Caesar was assassinated was because he was trying to bring the rents that the property owners were charging their tenants down, because it was becoming so exorbitant that they couldn't pay to live there anymore. And the property owners got pissed off at Julius, and they had him assassinated. They just killed him so you could get him out of the way. That was Parenti's assessment of
I'm Jimmy Dunn. Concerned about children, I guess, that are being beaten in their homes. A little 4-year-old girl was killed the other day by her parents here in the Houston area. And just last week or so, a report came out by Human Rights Watch and the ACLU about corporal punishment in our schools. It's still going on in 20 states. And a disproportionate share of these beatings are going to disabled children. And so, while parents people don't like the idea of child abuse, somehow they accept the idea of taking a big board and hitting a school child with it in the name of discipline. And that is very clearly legalized child abuse,
yes,
in my opinion. So I've been working to stop it. I formed a group called People Opposed to Paddling Students back in 1982, and we're still working on it. And we're going to go up to Temple, Texas next Monday because their school board voted to bring back paddling. We're going to explain and doing that.
So, thank you very much for sharing this, and I think you've just highlighted the fact that this is an important topic that requires our attention. There has been a movement afoot to request a cabinet-level position for peace.
That's good.
Yes, so I decided, as a result of my last presentation in the area, that I would write a letter to my congressman requesting that they consider this. I didn't even hear from 2 of them, senators, but I did hear from John Culbertson, who said, nice idea, but never going to happen. And I thought to myself, that says something, sadly enough.
Well, that's what they said about ending slavery. So
yes,
maybe just 300 years.
And women having the right to vote. I taught a very interesting class one time in a nursing home, 5 women and 1 man. The man was a pharmacist. And of course, this was when I was young and they were old, so they were around in the early century. And the man said, the women were, you could tell they got into it. They were feeling all the passion that they had had in 1915 when they were advocating for the right to vote. And I turned to this gentleman and said to him, "What was your attitude?" He said, "You know, I can't remember. We just didn't think women were smart enough to vote." And I thought, yeah, I rest my case here. Yes, sir.
I'm Ariel. I just wanted you to know, in case you didn't know, that John Culberson's parents were humanists.
Good. Really? Well, maybe you and I need to talk after.
His father passed away a number of years ago. His mother's still living, but doesn't get around much. She's only been to 1 or 2 meetings in the last few years.
Well, I was so disappointed by that letter from him because I guess I had hoped for more. But I am glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
I have a practical question. My wife and I came from England. We were horrified by the number of murders that occur in this country, gun-related, etc. And for many years we've supported what used to be called handgun control, it's now Brady campaigns. We've sent a lot of money to those people and it's not been terribly effective. Now my practical question is, if I were to take the average contribution that we send to them, would we send it to some other place that would be more effective? That you know of a way, can you think of a way that would be more effective than sending it to the Brady campaign?
If you will give me your email, I will put you in touch with a woman who can help you. I have a friend who's very involved in handgun issues and violence. So if you trust me with your email, or I can send the information to Diane and she can forward it to you.
I'm wondering if, in fact, we're barking at the wrong tree by going after gun control, or so. Is there maybe there's a more effective way of getting your suggestion of having a campaign for a cabinet level position? Who knows? Maybe it's more.
Yes,
Jimmy is interested in this question too.
So maybe that would be.
I have another nice idea that may never happen. But it seems to me that you mentioned part of the problem is that people don't respect other human beings. And I think that's a big problem for this country because we are so huge. This country is so huge. And so we end up being rather insular. So many Americans never ever get out of their country. A few do, even out of their state, you know, a few do, the ones who have some money and so on. But most Americans, I think, probably never see another country. If all 18-year-olds, upon leaving high school, had to spend 6 months in another country before going to college, I think that would change the outlook of generations as they grow older, and it would cost a drop in the ocean compared to what we are already spending on other projects. So my suggestion would be to send every young person to another country for 6 months, and I think they would come back with a very different mindset.
Right. It's hard to say now. You are saying bring them back, right?
Personally, I want to call for that. I've lived all over the world, from the Far East to South America to Europe and here. I'm an American citizen. I am still appalled at the violence here compared to other countries where I've spent and lived a good many years. And I finally concluded that if there is any hope to reducing this, you have to start at the cradle. As long as the small children from kindergarten on up, even in preschool, play with soldiers and tanks and video games where you shoot each other, there's absolutely no hope. I have observed that because I was not a tourist. I've actually lived in those countries for a number of years. And we pride ourselves of being tolerant and
so forth. Well, we are not that tolerant.
Thank you. Very
I have
wise words.
encountered innumerable derogatory conversations. I made my way in the business world because I learned how to keep my mouth shut. And therefore, I am a little bit reluctant at this point to even give my opinions in public, and I only can feel free to make comments or discuss these subjects in a group that more or less is on my same wavelength.
And this is an
that's what it amounts to.
Yes, this is an organization that is based on reason. And as a result of my own study with this, I've become far more vocal than I was before.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm finding, of course, the last 8 years has been painful for me politically because of some of the things that I've watched our country do. But I've decided that, and that probably has prompted interest in how do we express ourselves? How are we true to ourselves in a society that may not agree with us? So I think your point is well taken.
I think that none of us here are going to see a change, whether we are my generation or the next one or the next one.
But we can be a seed. We can raise the question.
Hopefully. This might take 2 or 3 generations.
Exactly. Exactly.
Oh well.
Yeah, my husband's family came from Germany, and when all the immigration stuff was going on in the United States, I went back and read their letters from from the early letters. It took 3 generations before they talked to each other in English. And I said to people who talked to me about immigration and why don't people learn English, look at your own family. Let's stop and think about this. It takes time. It takes time. Yes.
In support of Sheila and what this lady just said, how many people here have watched Bowling for Columbine?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I saw that.
Okay, that's Michael Moore's sort of anti-gun movie, but it isn't really. And the position he takes, what I gathered from the movie, is he makes an example of Detroit, which is from time to time the murder capital of the United States, and its opposite city across the Great Lakes, Windsor, Ontario. Well, they have gun laws in Detroit. They don't have any in Windsor, Ontario. Anybody wants a gun, gets a gun, okay? But their murder rate is, Windsor, Ontario, is ridiculous. It's almost not worth talking about. Right, and his point I think he's making is that the problem isn't the guns, it's the culture of violence.
Oh, okay.
And that if people look at violence as the first answer, they'll find some way to be violent. Guns make it easy, but they'll find some other way.
Wow. What a powerful statement. Thank you. Thank you.
But I'm just wondering, going back to what Lou just said and the Finches, I understand some 15 years ago or whenever, all privately owned firearms were confiscated in the UK. And the way I understand it, that's when their murder rate started going up.
Really?
Is that true?
Well, the murder rate been going up, but I don't think it's guns were confiscated. Because there's a lot of guns and influence from continental Europe has been coming into Britain.
And American movies.
Russia.
I think they do it anyway.
Okay, in the interest of time, I would like to move now to the sheet that I handed out to you. I put together an overview of nonviolent communication, which will be your Roman numeral 2. Does everyone have a copy? And then on the back, Roman numeral 3, what are the steps of nonviolence? The foundational statements of nonviolent communication underpin the comment that I made early on. Language is important. What we say should accurately communicate who we are, what our feelings are, and what our needs are. And the training in nonviolent communication is actually a 4-step. Learning to observe very carefully concrete actions that are affecting our well-being. Let me share with you an example. One statement could be, violence is bad, people who kill others are evil. This is a moralistic kind of a judgmental statement, not speaking from the heart. Might instead say, I am fearful of the use of violence to resolve conflicts. I value the resolution of human conflicts by other means. So that is just one example of how language can be important. You're not calling someone evil. You know, we often talk about separating the behavior from the human being. But this would be one example of how that takes place. Secondly, how we feel in relation to what we are observing. I am fearful. I've put together a page that talks about many of the emotions that how we feel when our needs are being met, how we feel when our needs are not being met. There are only about 10 copies, but I'll lay them up here, and if you're interested in that, you certainly may pick up one of those. And then how do you express the need or the desire that you have? I want us to be friends. And in order for that to happen, this is what has to change. Now, there are 2 parts of that nonviolent communication I'm looking at. C now. Expressing honesty through these 4 components. And a lot of that means that you have to know yourself pretty well. And as Diane pointed out in her comment, I needed help. That was prophetic. I needed help. You recognize, and that's one reason loving your enemies becomes so important, because sometimes that enemy there's some reason that person is an enemy, and that reason may be an education for me. Why does that person offend me? Why does that behavior offend me? So there's much communication that blocks compassion. Judgments, right and wrong statements, shoulds. He should do this, she should do that. So we learn to observe without evaluating. Here's an example of that. Here's an observation with evaluation. You are too generous, but an observation, an example of observation with no judgment. We're looking at facts here. When I see you give all your lunch money to others, I think you are too generous. You are being too generous. So the purpose here is to separate judgment from the facts. You observe the facts and you make the statement based on the facts, not a judgment call.
Is it that person's place to tell them they're too generous in the first place? Because to me it would appear it's none of their darn business.
That's a good point too. Identifying and expressing feelings, we've talked about that. Comparisons are often a way that we demoralize someone else or we feel demoralized ourselves. Another is using the phrase, I choose, not, I had to do this. I have to do this. You don't have to do anything. You choose to do it. You want to do it. You desire this to happen. There are many ways that we abdicate responsibility. When he threw the ball at me, I had to throw the ball back at him. No, you don't have to. We have choices. You are a human being here. Receiving empathetically through the 4 components. So there's 2 sides. Oh, I'm sorry.
I just want to make one comment on what Sarah said. She said that if it's none of the person's business, how generous. That all depends if the person who's giving away his lunch money alternately comes to me and asks me if he can borrow money or if I can give him money. Now that becomes my business. And then I'm in a position to say, well, you just gave all your money to that person, so now you expect me to reimburse you. I think you have a problem with generosity.
There you go. And I've frequently said to many people, knowing what is my problem and what is not my problem, setting boundaries is a very important thing. My husband and I are both oldest children in the family, and oldest children have those issues. They are not very good at setting boundaries. So learning to identify, like to say, what is my problem and what is your problem?
I have a question.
Yes.
In C1A, you're listing communication and block compassion as one of the 4 components.
Yes, and that's where I use the word the judgmental communication, where he said you're you're too generous, or that person's evil, using judgmental words in talking to people versus, and then saying right or wrong, it was wrong of you to do this.
Right, but what I'm saying is communication and blocks compassion doesn't sound like a communication you want to use.
Much communication that is used stops either further communication or hinders compassion. I think that's the point.
Right, but I mean, wouldn't you want to say as one of the 4 components that you want to use communication that allows compassion?
That encourages compassion.
Yeah.
Right. But this was really taken from the book, and it lists about 10 different ways that communication can block compassion. But your point is well taken. What we're learning is communication that encourages compassion. Thank you. Good point. Receiving empathetically now, and the first step is deep listening. Trying to focus on the person talking to you and to refrain from bringing past history to that conversation. Trying to listen in the now with that person. Ask before offering advice or reassurance, and regardless of the words, we only hear what others are observing, feeling, reading, and requesting. Many times, I'm sure you've heard someone use words and you know that the word has nothing to do with what may be going on. So trying to listen to your whole body, your intuition as well. I think D is very, yes.
This to me seems kind of professional, or, a lot of these are like stranger to stranger. If I go to a town hall meeting and someone's really angry, and I'm a stranger to him, he's a stranger to me, you can probably only do a little bit and back off of it. Even acquaintance is not much. Now, it also seems really intellectual and really backboring. Stay with the example of the lunch money. Now, when you first gave the example, I thought it was like a parent to a child, but it seems to have developed more like peer to peer, so like assuming that it's another drawing, instead of making, a very formal statement, like you might have a psychology book on assertiveness. The more human response might be, wow, you gave this guy's a stranger, and you gave, all this money, and me to go with that, and have a dialogue, but let the dialogue. This maybe is too patterned, I think. I think it kind of reminds me of like a psychology book that's kind of clunky and clumsy. Perhaps.
Right, and probably a foundation. You know, it's
Okay.
the beginning of a process, because you know, there's a point, I always said in financial planning, there's a point where I analyze the numbers, but there's a point where it becomes an art. It's not a science, it's an art. And this is where your wisdom of living and knowing when to make a joke out of something, or the art of the inspector, where he went down to that person and confronted them. What do you mean when you say that to me at the town hall meeting? You know, how to know when to use which strategy becomes the art form. Good point. And then number 3, practice self-forgiveness. We're learning here. This is a process. E, expressing anger fully. Try to separate the stimulus from the cause. Back to your comment earlier about someone breaking in your house, what are you going to do? All anger has a self-serving core. At the core of all anger, there's a need. Or anger can become a wake-up call. Mahatma Gandhi, when he was treated the way he was in South Africa, channeled that anger, became a wake-up call for him. Anger co-opts energy by diverting it toward punitive action. It's very easy to respond in a violent, angry way, but you lose a lot of the anger when it could be extracted. It could be channeled into something far more powerful.
Can you give an example? I kind of lost.
Well, Mahatma Gandhi, instead of fighting, instead of being angry and going out and hitting a punching bag, founded a movement that eventually changed apartheid in not only South Africa, but about freedom and affected our own country in terms of racial. He channeled that energy. And here, the word anger is the seed that not only addresses conflict, nonviolent communication, but it is also the seed that is the power of the passive resistance movement. So we have 4 options when we get angry. We can blame others, we can blame ourselves, we can sense our own feelings and needs, or we can, as Diane mentioned, try to put ourselves in the shoes of the other person. Now, what are the steps of the nonviolent movement? Keep that seed of anger in your mind. I think that's where the crosshair comes. The steps, the foundational statements. Nonviolence is a positive force generated by self-sacrifice in the cause of truth. We've already agreed this is not an easy process. Violence is far easier than nonviolence. Dehumanization, number 2, is the beginning of all violence. As Martin Luther King said, the universe bends toward justice. 4 is the kicker. We can be nonviolent only by actively caring for the well-being of our opponents. And
if somebody is coming in my house, I don't care about that.
I think we're talking about a different situation here. And the very struggle is the source of nonviolent power. The struggle that we have with ourselves individually to identify our needs and desires is the source.
Oh, so that's a personal, interior struggle. Let me add that on.
Okay. So the 6 steps, awakening nonviolent power. And here's where your comment about you finally got tired of speaking up. I can share some kind of scary stories of times when I wish I had spoken up and I hadn't. And it's time for reasonable people to find our voice, perhaps. Know the conflict, the escalation curve. I thought this one was really interesting. And I think it's small enough that you can You can see it's kind of a square here, and you can see that the curve starts over here and then gets really strong toward the end.
What's that an example of?
It's called the escalation curve. So let's think about the civil rights movement in the United States. That was probably the most prominent example of passive resistance in the United States. It starts out low and then gets very high. Had the privilege of hearing a man by the name of James Lawson speak. He was very elderly at the time. I think he passed away maybe a year or two later. Because of him, I became appreciative of the fact that the civil rights movement in the United States was very carefully choreographed. Planned. Right. Rosa Parks was the ideal person selected to do what she did. And James Lawson was not only involved in all of the planning work with Martin Luther King, he actually trained the people who did the sit-ins at the lunch counters. So
James Lawson?
Lawson,
I think he's the guy that runs the church up here in.
I think that's a different.
I think they were both there. They might be related.
Really? Well, that would be worth finding out. It was a very powerful presentation. So powerful, the next day I went back and heard it again. Yes.
Yeah, that's the thing.
First of all, the question is raised: why are things like they are? Why can't they be different? Why can't we have 2 years of public service that all young people participate in one level or another? Why? Start asking the question. So the escalation curve begins by awareness and first a negotiating part of the struggle. Secondly, requesting changes. Meanwhile, constructive pogroms are begun and that, in my most recent meeting, has been the most powerful. The idea of establishing constructive pogroms. But notice, toward the end of the struggle, it's resistance and sacrifice. Resistance and sacrifice. So this is not a struggle that is ever taken on lightly. When Gandhi or Martin Luther King started their movement, and the science, as it's being called today, says you don't start unless you're prepared to see it through. And to see it through can be sacrifice. Well, we think of Gandhi and King, and we think of the young people that were killed. And it was only when those deaths occurred that the country woke up and said, we don't want this in our country. I thought that escalation curve was.
And you're going to have time to talk about those 3 women that you mentioned earlier?
Yes, I am. So I've got, what, about 2 minutes? Okay, good point. The escalation curve. So choosing goals, using the right means, you can read a lot of this, clinging to the truth, and then number 6, coping with success. Resisting the age-old psychology of victors. If I win, that means you lose. Either with us or against us. No, we're against war. We're not against you. We're against war. In a nonviolent success, there are no losers. And in the end, that inner spirit of nonviolence, which always forgives, shows compassion, and seeks reconciliation, will be the mark of success. Okay, and my concluding remark was the statement that I found so powerful, asking the question, is there another way? We will continue to have war until we learn to love our children more than we hate our enemies. I always thought that was a very powerful statement. So the question is, who are these women? Emily Balch, B-A-L-C-H, is a professor at Wesley College who wanted to teach peace
peacemaking, and she established the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. I had never heard of them. Jeanette Rankin from Montana was the first woman member of Congress elected 4 years before women were even allowed to vote. So she was elected in 1916. She was re-elected in 1940, so she took off. And so you stop and think about American history.
My goodness.
In 1916, we were in the midst of World War I. 1940, we jumped into World War II, and she said, hasn't anything changed? That was a great line. We did the same thing when I was here last. And another statement she made was really great. You can no more win a war than win an earthquake. And Barbara Lee of California is the only person to vote no in 2001 the war mechanism.
The Burmese, I saw pictures of that magnificent Burmese woman who was going to have another 18 months of house arrest. Do you think her, I just heard yesterday, they slapped another 18 months in their protest. Do you think her tactics will win out because she's so magnificent, but she seems to be hitting a stone wall? Do you have any input on the matter?
I would like to share with you just briefly the revolutions that have occurred nonviolently in the last 20 years. You'll remember the markets, the Philippines, Chile, Poland, Mandela, and the Georgia, the Revolution of the Roses, and then Liberia. So thank you so much for allowing me to be able to do this.